Hi everybody, Stephanie here. So today I'm going to talk about how you are contributing to your own low energy. So in a past life, I owned a couple of yoga studios and I used to be really passionate about teaching about how energy and emotions are really connected, okay? So energy is something that all of us seek more of traditionally, and sometimes we have an issue where we have high amounts of energy versus low amounts of energy, but very often it's quite rare to see somebody who's more or less stable and balanced in their energy system throughout the whole day. Often we wake up and we need a stimulant, sometimes in the mid-afternoon we need a stimulant, and then sometimes we're too wired to go to bed. And so as human beings, we've learned to not be very mindful and conscious of our energy. And I just want to kind of share something with you guys that really helped me understand how emotions really deeply impact your energy. This is basic, some of you may already know this, but it's always good to have a reminder. I find being a human being, we need reminders. So energies carry a vibrational weight to them, so to speak, a vibrational density. And we all know basic science, physics here is that we're all made of elements of energy already. So your emotions are coming from thoughts, right? And very often these thoughts are running as a subconscious background program, so you're not even really aware of what you're thinking at every single moment often, right? I know many times I drive in my car and I don't even realize how I got from point A to point B because I'm just thinking, right? So the mind is constantly going, but very often if we're not conscious and mindful of where our thoughts are going, they're creating emotions, they're creating feelings, and that can start to have an energy attached to it. So I always say, and many of you maybe have heard of this already, that emotions are energy in action. You can be happy 1 minute and sad and depressed 5 minutes later, and then happy 10 minutes later. Obviously, we don't like to bounce around like that, but sometimes we do, and it just proves to you that your emotions shift, and the energy that you have along with those emotions shift. So take, for instance, when you feel happy, that's an emotion. Grateful, that's an energy, an emotion. Blissful, ecstatic. Think of what that feels like. It's peaceful. It's got a lighter feeling to it. It's got a higher vibrational frequency to it. But think about something like being really angry at somebody, or being hurt, or being, feeling guilty or feeling ashamed about something. Those carry an energetic frequency of weight to them. And just by thinking of it, I know that you can place yourself in this empathetic, background of realizing what that actually feels like. You can remember what they feel like. And it doesn't feel great. So what we need to do is be mindful of our thoughts before we let them really create deep emotions. Very often it's the thought that comes first, and sometimes it's unconscious. It's a program running. But then when it's become a feeling, I want you to try to notice your feeling. Try to notice it as soon as possible, especially if it's something that doesn't feel good. If it's something that does feel good, if you're out walking in the park and you see a beautiful family and a baby and it makes your heart open and you feel wonderful, that's great, right? Smile, enjoy it, feel the energy of it. But if you're feeling something that doesn't feel good, right, what often happens is we don't pay attention to it, and then our thoughts feed into the storyline. And that creates more of the feeling, and it creates this density. It starts to develop this energetic mass, right? And it starts to build. And then it's harder to remove. It's harder to pull yourself out of that. Think of something like if you're in a chronic state of something more severe, or a chronic state of depression. This is an energetic weight that's been lingering on you for long amounts of time, and it just feels impossible to get through often. So it's good, and it's something that can be really helpful to start to be mindful of your feelings, especially when they don't feel good. Okay? Because what's happening is you're losing energy. You're leaking energy. Slowly and surely, the energy is just being sieved out of you. And before you know it, think about what it's like if you're in a state of depression. You can't get up. You're on the couch. You're tired. You have no energy. You're fatigued. So you have the choice. Sooner than later, to continue to perpetuate these thinking patterns. And of course, sometimes, we're in circumstances where we're very, very overwhelmed and we need to seek help. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. It's not. But for, a vast amount of us, I think that starting to understand our energy and starting to be aware and mindful and conscious of our thoughts and how our thoughts become emotions and how thoughts feed into the storyline, we can actually stop ourselves. We can actually say, oh, I'm doing this again, right? I'm doing this. The mind is playing tricks on me again, and it's trying to confirm this story where I somehow feel inadequate, or I feel sad, or I feel depressed. You can reframe your story, right? I know this because I've done it with many, many, many feelings and emotions and circumstances, and even larger things like having anxiety and bouts of depression. I've learned that you can have some sort of an impact, a great impact, on your energy and on your emotions by being more mindful of them, okay? So one thing that I do is, first, is to be aware. So if you don't feel good, before you just unconsciously continue to perpetuate the story in your head, see if you can notice. I don't feel good. I feel this, fill in the blank. And I'm going to just see if this is an accurate thought and decide, can I shift out of this energy and focus on something else, Sometimes the answer is no, you can't, or you're choosing to perpetuate the story. I remember when I really clearly started to understand how this all worked and really connect my mind to my emotions. I had this experience happen that was a storyline that had been playing out for a couple of years, actually. And I felt hurt by this particular storyline in this moment once again. I started to feel like a lack of self-worth and sad and, a little bit depressed, but it was something that I had experienced often with that particular circumstance, so it wasn't unfamiliar. But in that moment of clarity, when I was like, oh, here I am again in this thought, this broken record playing again, what I did was I said, all right, Stephanie, you've been here before. Do you want to shift your thinking here and start to see this situation accurately, or do you want to keep perpetuating the story? And it was like, my self was talking to myself, right? No, that sounds weird, but, and I recognized there that I had a choice. I had a choice to go back into the storyline, to be sad, to be depressed, to, go eat a pint of Ben & Jerry's in my bedroom, or to shift the narrative. And it's funny because I asked myself the question, and I actually, at that moment, was like, no, I want to continue to feel bad, so I'm going to get the ice cream and go lay down and watch a movie. But I laughed because I had to call myself out. I was like, oh my gosh, I chose to continue the story and to continue the suffering. I chose to continue the suffering, right? So self-awareness and mindfulness and observation of your feelings. And then notice if you can somehow ask yourself, can I flip this script? And very often you can. And notice how sometimes there's a resistance to flipping the script and a desire to perpetuate the story because somehow we're used to it. For some reason, the suffering, we get something from the suffering, or we're still learning from the suffering. But I just want you guys to start to be mindful and start to develop this practice of when you feel bad. Notice what it is. You've probably been there before. It's probably a storyline that plays out very often in your life. And I want you to stop, okay? And I really want you to ask yourself, be mindful. Are my thoughts feeding into this storyline and making me feel bad? And if so, can I change the narrative? And notice how you feel when you ask yourself that. And really be honest with yourself. Notice how sometimes you're like, yeah, I feel too much like a victim here, and I don't want to get out of this feeling. But you're choosing to continue and perpetuate the suffering. And I'm not saying that's bad because we all learn in suffering, Pain is something that's temporary. Suffering can last a long time depending on when we want to consciously move out of it. Okay, so just something to think about. Basic energy work, one-on-one, that's really important to realize how your emotions work and how those emotions really, really can terribly drain your energy. And then very often we blame other things, but really often it's your own mind that's perpetuating the energy loss through choosing to have these self-limiting thoughts and beliefs and feelings. See ya.